Welcome to Silverstone's Grand Prix circuit. We've got 20 of the world's fastest drivers in rFactor 2 as we look for McLaren's world's fastest gamer.
Now, whilst we're here at Silverstone, a wet and miserable Silverstone, competition takes place at the Zandvoort circuit, the beachside resort in Holland, which means it's going to be epic.
It's Silverstone's Grand Prix circuit, and we've elevated our game from week one. In fact, 3 stories higher as we've gone from the pit garages to the mezzanine of Hall 5, and we're jumping back into rFactor to find our continued quest for the world's fastest gamer.
Yeah, we've already had our first round last week, and we established the first 5 finalists that will go through to kind of the grand final in the start of September. This is the second round to find the next 5.
Yeah, brilliant race as it was in round number 1. We switched circuits, we'll get to that in a minute, but of course there was tons of action, 5 sort of favorites, 2 of them that had some drama, but let's take a look, I think, at the highlights because it was an exceptional start at Silverstone's Grand Prix circuit as it was for round 1.
Green flag, green flag.
And off we go then. I don't think Ballester got all the way to the back. It's Rudy Van Buren who takes the lead. And that's Bonito, I think, has run super wide. But a little bit of argy-bargy through those first corners. I guess, as you'd expect.
Yeah, very frantic first few laps. Oh, yeah, we had in the background. That was Fran Lopez.
Great racing between those guys. Bit of contact. Cox corner, it's not really a place you want to overtake. It's not really a place you want to go side by side. Lopez gets the slide. Ryan goes wide.
Oh, that's a spin for Lee Morris up at the Stoke corner. Lost the back end of the car.
It is Rudy Van Buren who leads. Well, he doesn't have anyone around him, actually, does he? Look, he seems safe, at least, in that position. Rudy Van Buren then across the line to take the checkered flag, and he is the first victor of the world's fastest gamer, rFactor 2, round 1 qualifier. The qualifiers then, Rudy Van Buren, Nikodem Wawrzycki, Hani Al-Sabti, Graham Carroll and Atsi Kirchhoff. Work to do for the rest.
And congratulations to those 5 qualified drivers. Van Buren, by the way, was in a world of his own. Very smooth, controlled race. Great super pole, started at the front and lights to flag victory, ultimately. Or flag to flag as it's a rolling start, which, by the way, Ballester didn't quite understand. There was some drama last week.
Well, I have to admit, neither did I. I didn't listen to my race director, and I called the start of the race when they were on their warm-up lap. But interesting story with Ballester. He went for the start when everyone else was pulling off slowly, piled into the back of one of the favourites, Enzo Benito, and damaged Enzo's car, so he wasn't able to take part. And Ballester then was eventually disqualified from the race. And the reason for it, subsequently he spoke to the race director, he reached out on social media, and he said he effectively didn't speak the language and didn't understand enough English to work out actually what was going on, completely lost.
Yeah, exactly, and you guys kind of touched on it as well, sensory overload, it kind of spirals out of control, but as a race as a whole, very competitive, as you'd expect when you have over 2,000 drivers vying for those 20 spots. I think 3/10 divided them last week for that race. Well done. There is some returning names this week as we switch our focus to a new circuit. We go to Zandvoort. We entirely changed the page, and thankfully it's very wet here at Silverstone, so it's a little bit brighter and sunnier for the competitors. But we do have some returning names, one of which is Ballester. He has requalified where Benito has not.
Yeah, so Jem Bulabashi finished 6th last week, so he was the first non-qualifier, and our 7th place, Martin Stefanov, I think, he was 7th, so he's also going to be one of the favourites at Zandvoort, but Zandvoort's such a different circuit to Silverstone, very much narrower, far twistier, and far more difficult. So we've got specialists, Dutch specialists who have come in. They weren't in the round at Silverstone. They didn't even try to. So we've got 10 drivers that we saw try to qualify at Silverstone now in Zandvoort, and 10 new people that we need to get accustomed to and see how they can do. 2/10 faster than everybody else was Rietveld, who we didn't see at Silverstone, but he's smashing it at Zandvoort so far.
Exactly that. We did not see him at Silverstone, so very, very impressive. But as you say, Dutch specialist perhaps coming in to a Dutch track, very different conditions. I expect maybe some more mistakes, some more errors, and maybe someone who made a few of his own, or was he perfect? Miguel is going to give us a perfect lap guide of Zandvoort.
Okay, we're about to do a lap of the Zandvoort circuit. Very fun circuit. Now you're approaching the first corner, hand the brakes down to second. Still can carry a lot of speed into this first corner because of the camber. Now to the second corner, very blind corner, third gear, very narrow on the exit, and then into the hairpin. Very important to have a nice exit out of this hairpin, because after this bit will be full power on this GT3 car. Very fun part, this one. Around 135 miles an hour over this crest, then brake down to fourth, very fast right-hander. Brake down to third, back on the power. Very tricky corner, this one, usually a bit of understeer on the entry and sometimes a bit of oversteer on the exit. Next corner, very important to have a clean exit, because afterwards we have a very long straight. Hand the brakes for the chicane, second gear. Be very patient on the power on the exit here, because it's very easy to have too much oversteer, and then you might ruin your lap. Second last corner, you can use a bit of the curb here, back on the power. And last corner is almost full power. And that's how you do a lap on the Zandvoort circuit.
Well, there we go, Miguel Fischka. I've got it right this week. Not the best lap, if I'm honest.
Well, I have here a book of racing driver excuses.
Well, it happens that it's quite hard to speak and drive fast at the same time. At least explaining all bits and bobs of the track.
No, jokes aside, I think it was a great circuit guide. It really gives us a perfect example of what to expect at Zandvoort. You're a former GT Academy winner, race steward, but now we're joined as well by Ed, race director, of course, in race control. Pretty straightforward race. A few incidents last week, including that start, which we mentioned, and one further penalty for, I think it was Lopez and Ryan that got into it.
Yeah, they were kind of getting into it all the way through the race, so we felt something had to be done to be fair about it.
Tighter circuit, a little bumpier, perhaps more argy-bargy. Do you expect the standards to be up or down over last week's race?
The driving line really does fill quite a lot of the circuit. It's so narrow, so I think I'm expecting more incidents at this circuit, definitely, than Silverstone.
Yeah, well, you've got all the information. You've got, obviously, the live timing, circuit map, replays are available to you guys. Everything's here. You see it all, and as spectators, we see it all. But in order to do so, we'd like to be coaxed through it, perhaps you could say, by our commentators, Ben and Scott.
Indeed, joining me at the commentary box this week, expert of sim racing, Scott Woodwis. Scott, you've been monitoring the qualifying sessions so far. So we've had qualifying. How close was it? It's not as close as Silverstone, but that's kind of a nature of the Zandvoort track, right?
Yeah, it was. It's a different circuit, of course. It's like Silverstone with lots more elevation changes. Very, very tricky circuit, as you guys were saying over there. But about 0.3 per second in qualifying. It's the man who was top of the times, Jeffrey Rietveld, and also we've got David Mroczek, who are top of the times. About 0.2 off their ultimate pace from when they did the qualifiers. But other guys up there, we've got Mitchie Hoya, Martin Stefanka, and David Williams, the biggest improver. He was towards the bottom of the top 20, but managed to get himself into the top 5. And below that, it was a frantic scrap. About 6th to 11th place was pretty much 1/10 of a second in between it. There's a couple of guys even setting exactly the same time. So,
and is that kind of something you would expect to see? Jeffrey Rietveld, I mean, he has a 2/10 advantage after the time trials. So to have him on the top of the qualifying session, that's kind of expected, right?
A little bit. It depends on circuit dependence and how quickly quick how they'll be able to develop their setup depending on when they finish qualifying to coming into the race. And we saw that at Silverstone, so there's continuation of that to get a little bit quicker. So these guys have found a bit more pace. A couple of guys have dipped into the 133s now, so it's the same as it was. Find that pace, improving it, and get themselves ready for the race.
Yeah, and that's very interesting because the 134.0 was the fastest time in time trials. So to get under the 34s means once again we're seeing development day by day. And I believe also that their car had an update just a week ago. So the car is a different style of car to what we saw in the first round, and that would have mean the drivers have to adapt and find a setup for how the car is now to how it was before. It
would have been minor tweaks to the physics or something along those lines, but effectively it's just the drivers have to get used to that, as you said, adapt the setup and then go quickly. And then maybe if there's about a 2/10 difference, that seems to be what's going on that side there. But so far it seems that they seem to be adapting to it pretty well, and top 5 is what it is, and we're getting ready for Super Pole.
Right, okay, so we've had the qualifying session, but we now have our Super Pole session coming up. What does that entail and how does it work?
Super Pole is effectively, if anyone used to watch qualifying for Formula 1 back in sort of the early mid to 2000s, effectively one driver goes after the other, they get 3 laps, an out lap, a flying lap and an in lap, and effectively if you screw up on your in lap, that's it. So you stay in the top 5, but if, say for example, let's say Rietveld, lo and behold, actually screws up his lap time, he'll go to the back of the top 5. So it's one single lap, and you've got to get it right, otherwise you're in trouble.
Well, looking forward to getting the cars out on circuit at the Zandvoort track. It is a real challenge, an amazing place to drive. So we need to get ready. Over to Matt.
Well, looking forward to it indeed. Of course, just like last week, there's been lots of you joining us, but we will be interactive on social media, on Twitter, #WEFG. Of course, we also can include the Facebook Live or YouTube Live chat comments in that. So keep them rolling all the way through. We'll jump in toward the end. Look, Super Pole is all important. Last week, we had 5 drivers shooting it out to get to those spots. Not all 5 of those made it through, but grid position is everything when you've got a short 30-minute race coming our way. Super Pole is right now.
Getting stuck like a pundit thing. I'm like, must move frankly stops. Naturally, my flow is just play by play. So, but we'll oh, first guy out, I think.
David Williams will be our first driver out onto circuit. We've got 5 drivers coming up for you in this Super Pole session, with Stefanko, who was 7th last week, Hoya, and then the 2 special drivers that we've not yet seen in this competition for Zandvoort. They've been at the top of the times all weekend long, David Miracek and Jeffrey Reitfeldt. And just getting our first look then at the Zandvoort track, and coming around the final 2 corners, pretty fast corners, and David Williams, who I believe really isn't a specialist of rFactor, because there are different platforms in sim racing, and David Williams likes to ply his craft on iRacing, so this is a slight departure for him.
A little bit, yeah. He's been someone who I believe is in racing in the iRacing World Championship Grand Prix Series, but of course he's been able to dabble here to come across to rFactor. Of course, there is a little bit more about iRacing, as people may have seen earlier on, sort of announced this week. But as he starts his lap now through the first couple of corners on this 2.86 mile circuit, he's going to try and do the best he can. He's up through the right-hander, up towards the Hugenholtz hairpin, 180 degrees. And he's got to do as best he can. He's one of the 3 sort of few Brits in the foot. He's from Guernsey and the Channel Islands. So as he heads to the very tricky Hunsrück S's, winding through the sand dunes, he's certainly on it in this first sector.
Yeah, interesting you mentioned the nationalities. 13 different nationalities racing in those different countries, not like we see in real racing where you actually have to go to a single place. They're all in different countries, from Macedonia, the Netherlands, Poland, Czech Republic, Turkey, Portugal. In fact, we've got 2 drivers from Portugal, and they're both in the same city. They're both in Porto. David Williams then through the first sector, a 42.7 he's registered. Doesn't look so good so far.
I think in qualifying we've seen guys go about a second quicker, but remember these guys would have been doing about 2 laps worth of fuel. 3 laps worth of fuel really, because they've got to do enough for an out lap, a flying lap and an in lap, as we said, as it's a 25.8 second sector. Again, a little bit off the ultimate pace, but as he heads his way through the S bend up towards the final couple of corners, up towards the Kumo bend and then towards Ari Lindijk, it's been a pretty tidy lap, and usually if it's tidy, it's usually quick.
Yeah, absolutely. We haven't seen any sliding, not too much opposite lock, and the car looks very planted indeed. Not what we were seeing at Silverstone last week with the 650S. They really were having to throw the thing around down this very long start-finish straight, and David Williams sets the first time, which is a 1:35.229. That's going to be beaten, surely.
Yeah, that's going to be a pretty tricky one to beat, as we're going to get our next driver out on track in a few moments' time. And it should be intriguing to see how the next man out, which should be, I think that's going to be Martin Stefanko, is going to be the one to come up onto circuit, see what he can do here on the Zandvoort circuit in qualifying, as he goes on to start his flying lap for one of 3 drivers that actually is part of a team called Abbott Chronic Racing. There's 3 of them in the field tonight. We've got Mitchie Hoya and also Timu Valkiavi as he heads through the first corner. But Stefanko sort of leading the charge here, and he heads up towards turn 2, which is up towards the corner at Hugenholtz for the hairpin. Again, pretty tidy, no dramas, and seems to be handling it pretty well.
Right, so let's get on board then and have a look at just how this car is handling and just how tricky this back section of circuit is with their rolling hills. This circuit actually is built just a stone's throw, half a kilometre away from the North Sea, and these are all built on sand dunes. That makes it very, very tricky on grip in the real circuit. And obviously, if you are following racing around the world, you'll know that DTM have been at the Zandvoort circuit this weekend alongside the FIA Formula 3 Championship, and that meant Lando Norris was there too. First sector coming up, and it's a lot quicker than David Williams.
Yeah, that's more towards the ultimate pace from qualified. 41.9 for Martin Stefanko as he heads up towards the S-bend at the bottom of the hill. Very tricky braking under brakes, throws the car into the very tight right when it opens out on the left, 25.7. So actually he was down 4/10 from what Williams managed in the second sector. So mega sector from Williams, but that first sector just couldn't get it hooked up as he heads through the Kumo bend, and then a long run through Ari Lineup to get back onto the pit straight. And let's see, he's certainly going to be quicker, but the question has to be now, Ben, by how much?
Well, coming towards the line then, he's certainly going to be faster than Martin Stefanko, than David Williams. Across the line, Stefanko goes provisionally fastest, and it's actually, it's only a 10th faster. It's not a particularly strong final sector for Martin Stefanko. He does go fastest, but a 1:35.6. We've seen cars in the 33s. There's still plenty of margin to improve. And the next driver on circuit will be Mitchie Hoya, a man that we didn't see last week from Germany. The top 3 drivers we didn't actually see compete last week, although Jeffrey Reichelt did qualify. He wasn't able to take part in the first round qualifier.
So up towards big slides, he comes up towards the Hugenholtz hairpin, so he's pushing as the German, the second of the 3 Everchronic cars. Bit of twitch of oversteer on the exit to come up towards the Hunsrück S's then. Again, very high-speed part, using all the aerodynamic and mechanical grip that this 650S GT3 can provide. He comes up towards the end of the first sector. He's got a 43.1, so effectively it was pretty much equal first sectors for these two as they come through. And what's he going to put through here in the sector 1 as it comes up on the post? 42.6, and Mitchie Hoya is absolutely on it, half a second quicker than the 2 cars before him.
Well, that, again, is more in the ballpark that you would expect to see, because they've left such a massive margin for error in the final sector of the lap. So Hoya then comes through this second sector. This is the newest part of the Zandvoort circuit, built in 1948, a fantastic circuit in its heyday, hosted many a Grand Prix, and now comes back onto, this is still the newer part of the circuit. Big slide through the second section of the chicane, and then to the final 2 turns, goes back onto the old circuit, the Arie Luijendijk box. The very famous Dutch IndyCar driver, and I think this is going to be provisionally fastest for Mitchie Hoya, teammate to Stefanko, but I think he's going to be faster than Stefanko. Across the line he comes, and it is a 35.2, so he goes 3rd fastest.
And that means that itself actually was only fractions away from getting himself up through Mitchie Williams, but David Williams, I should say. But even so, that's a time to watch out for us. We now see our second to last man in Superpole, which is Dawid Mroczek of Poland, heading into Tarzan corner. That was the site of one point where we saw Gilles Villeneuve a few years ago when he had to kind of trail a puncher on the left rear on his Formula 1 car. But up through the right-hander at turn 2, another big slide, massive slide for Roger. That will cost him a lot of time to Hugenholtz. I'm afraid, Ben, on that side, he's possibly thrown the lap away before it's even hardly started. So up through Hunsrück and up towards the end of the S-bend for the first time. But that big slide through Hugenholtz is going to cost him a lot of time on this lap.
Now heading out over the dune, you can see just how bumpy it is, especially on the crest of the hill where the car goes super light and really hard to keep control. 4 wheels over the curb, bouncing over the curb, bouncing over the grass. This is committed from Mroczek, that's for sure.
And even so, it's still pretty quick, 42.4 for his sector. So he's really pushing, but again, it gets the tail out a little bit as they come through turns 9 and 10. trying to get the power back on again early through the middle part of the sector, using a little bit of the curb on the exit as they start to head towards the bottom end of the S-bend. And let's see what the sector time is as he breaks the barrier. And it is now 25.1. So even despite the slide through turns 2 and 3, Mrocek is absolutely on it right now.
The time to beat then, the best lap is a 1:35. Well, 1:35.2 is the best lap. And that, I think, is Mitchie Hoya, who has provisional fastest. No, 1:35.0 is Martin Stefanko's time. He is on provisional pole at the moment. And Miracek comes over the line, and it's a 1:35.6, so he is 4th fastest. And that is a disappointment, because in the time trials he was 2nd fastest, in pre-qualifying he was the 2nd fastest, and there was just too many mistakes in that lap.
It really was. Right, this is the man to watch then. This is going to be the one that all the home fans from Holland are going to be looking for. He wants to win at his home circuit. Jeffrey Rietveld, very experienced at rFactor, has been a race winner, been at some of the top teams in sim racing, including Precision, which was the home of a certain Bodo Huis at one point. Of course, he was a 5-time Formula Sim racing champion and one of our 5 hand-picked finalists for the McLaren World's Fastest Gamer. Tidy through Tarzan, and he was overall fastest. He put in a 1:34.031 in the qualifiers, up towards the Hugenholtz hairpin, much tidier than Roger this time. Keeps it nice and tight through the apex, and now trying to get the power back on. Again, just looks so tidy. Even looks a little bit boring, not over flamboyant, but again, usually that shows us a quick time.
Yeah, what we're seeing is he's able to throw the car into those really banked corners at the start of the lap, and the car is sticking well. The car is not dancing around too much. It's really trimmed out. We were talking earlier to the race director, Ed, who was telling me about setup. They really trim these cars out to the absolute edge of grip. But at the moment, this car looks absolutely planted, and the lap time is fantastic through the first sector, a 1:41.679, and at the moment this is a half a second faster than anybody else can go.
Yeah, and I wonder possibly if he can carry on going, he may possibly dip into the 34s. Of course, they're about a second off the ultimate pace, but as they come up towards the S-bend at the end of the second sector, let's see what he breaks the beam at. And the time goes 24.9. He's on an absolute flyer. A little bit of a kink through the first part of the S-bend, a little bit of a slide as he bumped over the curb. Lots of curb on the exit, touch of dust as he kicks up towards the final 2 corners. Rietveld here looks as though he's going to be on course for pole position, but the question has to be now, I'm sure, Ben, by how much?
Yeah, so through this final long right-hander, really 2 corners, but it's one long apex towards the line then. It's going to be fastest. He's been fastest all week long, and half a second faster than anybody else. That is a gauntlet laid down by Jeffrey Rietveld. He is from Gouda in the Netherlands. This is one of 2 circuits that exists in the Netherlands, and of course the only circuit that's held a Formula 1 Grand Prix, and he is about to fly the flag very high for the Netherlands. He has just one Dutch driver alongside him in the entry list, 15th position for Kevin Van Doren. But really, I think we're going to be watching Jeffrey Rietveld. He just needs to hold on for that half-an-hour race, make sure he makes no mistakes, and he could well be qualifying into the finals of the world's fastest gamer. He might well be a specialist at Zandvoort, but then he'll have to learn to be a specialist of the Silverstone National Circuit. 3 corners, challenging to make any kind of ground up, and that is where the next step of this particular process goes. But Jeffrey Rietveld, favourite all the way through, and now he is on the pole position with Martin Stefanko in 2nd, David Williams 3rd, Mitchie Hoya 4th, and David Moracek will be upset with just being in 5th position, having been 2nd all week long.
Well, exceptional, as always. A very competitive super pole and some drama, some very aggressive driving, I have to say. We've got Scott to come join us, and I've also got some news. I mean, Rietveld was absolutely sensational, but unfortunately Hoyer did not complete an in-lap. He's been demoted to 5th, so a bit of a change in the super pole. Still in the top 5, that's where you need to be in this race, but it will cost him a little bit of position.
He will. He's going to be disappointed with that, but no, rules are rules. If you don't complete an out-lap, and they say you have to have enough fuel to complete an out-lap, a fast lap and an in-lap, and if you don't abide it, then the race director's going to slap you on the wrist, so to speak. Yeah, absolutely, and they did. It was Miguel, the steward, that spotted it, and race director confirmed. So that is Mitchie Hoya dropping back to 5th place. Not a bad session, not quite as smooth or as clean, perhaps, as Silverstone. We didn't see
I think at Zandvoort there's really nowhere you could take advantage of curbing, not like Stowe Corner, you know, Van Buren last week running a little wide. It was pretty neat and tidy, had to be. It's a very narrow circuit, but there was a few people, especially Stefanko, I think it was, that was quite loose in the first sector.
Yeah, I think it was more Stefanko and also Marocic was as well. I think that's the reason why he was so far down the time. He was disappointed. That big slide through Hugenholtz, and that's turn 3. That's really what cost him most of the lap, and he was a little bit erratic into the S-bend as well. But so he'll be wanting to try and fight his way through. But I think the key thing we have to watch out for is that, you know, there are drivers who are quick over 1 lap, and there are drivers who are quick over a race distance. And I think effectively we have to be careful in terms of guys like Rietveld, who I've seen before, and I think will be able to be quick over race distance. But those guys in the top 5 are now going to prove that pace over a half-an-hour race and not just over 1 lap.
Well, unlike Enzo Benito, who qualified first to get into the race and qualified first before the Super Pole, Rietveld actually delivered and finds himself on pole overall. We've got the replay of his lap. This was the tidiest of all, I have to say, and fast from the beginning, because I have to say Stefanko was excellent in the first sector, but lost it in the final sector, so he was good all the way through.
He was, and if you look at the onboard here, if you're watching it, you can see effectively, you can tell he's on the limit because it's nice and smooth, but you've got this tiny little corrections of oversteer, and that's where you can tell. It looks nice and tidy, but you can tell he's pushing just because the car's just trying to step out a little bit, but he's got enough momentum and enough confidence in the car and the setup to be able to keep that car. A little twitch to the middle of Sheevlack there, and that's what we're talking about, being on the limit in terms of being just on the edge of control between...
Such a fast corner too.
Yeah, between in control and being completely out of control, and keeping it nice and tidy in the lines. You can tell he's someone who really does enjoy rFactor and enjoys the GT car, and I know that he's been mainly, from what he's done so far, someone who has raced mainly single-seaters in Grand Prix type cars.
And most people in GT series in all sims of all variety get a lot of understeer mid-corner on Zandvoort, a lot of bumps on entry to corners. He looks smooth all the way through. He clipped every single apex. Again here, this corner, right into the chicane, always tough because you can dislodge the car. He did actually clip the curb and still made it around quite smoothly to get on the exit power.
Yeah, he carried a lot of exit speed, apex speed into the first part of that chicane and up through the final couple of the corners, and it's so important getting the run off the Kumo corner through Ari Lindeck. That's such a crucial part to get a run, but even you can see there he's making small corrections, and that's showing that the car was just trying to get away from him, a little bit loose, but just the final sprint down the straight, and that's pole by half a second.
Yeah, half a second indeed. He was, I think, 2/10 faster than anyone over multiple laps to qualify, again, to get in open qualifiers to others. Remember, keep in mind, by the way, if you're at home and you want to dust off your pedals, plug them in and get involved, coming up next week, we jump into the final round, essentially, of the rFactor qualifiers. I think we have Silverstone National or International next week. International next week. But you can get involved in this. He, out of all of those open qualifiers, was 2/10 faster than anyone, and there's over 2,000 drivers in those. So he has looked very consistent, and again, remnants of Benito in the last race, but perhaps he can convert it to a win because consistency is there.
It is, and like I said just earlier on just now, you know, being quicking over 1 lap is one thing, but doing that consistently over race pace in terms of that's another thing. There's going to be some drivers outside the top 10 who had that race pace, guys like Lee Morris, guys like Cem Bolot-Bashi as well, who were quicker and up there 6th or 7th. If those top 5 hadn't been there, and of course then they were sort of ultimately running Silverstone Grand Prix again, effectively really they would have been up there towards the top and getting a top 5 spot. So those top 5 are there for now, but of course we know in both real and sim racing, qualifying is one thing, but the races are totally different kettle of fish.
Yeah, totally different beast. By the way, Cem Bolot-Bashi again sits, I think, 7th after qualifying. He was 6th last week in the race, so very, very close, but not close enough. He needs to be a little bit better in the race to get through. He can't face that heartbreak twice. I just mentioned it. There was over 2,000 people to qualify for the 20 spots in this race. We've got 10 familiar names, 10 new. This is how close they were. All 20 cars, 1 lap. This is it. So apparently, I apologize. I thought we were actually going to go in. We can actually talk over this. It's a bit discombobulating to look at and see. I've never seen a limousine made out of a McLaren 650 before, but I would definitely take that to a party.
It's like an 80-wheel McLaren 650 GT3S. But that's the key thing, of course, is that you can see the comparison in terms of the lines, what people are taking. So if you can make out who's who, and then first of all, I'll take my hat off to you if I was wearing one. But even so, it just shows how close and how consistent and how similar each of the laps are. And there's tiny little nuances, like, for example, we just saw Rietveld in that white car. He takes a much more earlier run into the corner. He's a bit wide on the apex there, and he drops back a little bit on that lap, but it looks as though he makes it up in this second part of the second sector here as he goes through, and that's a real crucial part. You can tell who was quicker in some areas of the circuit, who favoured some corners on their quickest lap, and because of that, it just shows little nuances in who's better at which part of the circuit.
Yeah, the late apex is certainly beneficial. Mid-corner, again, they're the late apex, so you can see a few cars sort of lunging forward on the entry because they're carrying apex speed, but they're not getting a straight late apex line, which you can see the benefits of, and obviously rear-wheel drive, GT, lots of power. I have to say, virtual world offering this sort of production tech. This is very cool. I wish we could see this for every racing series.
I'm not sure. I wonder if now they've got the new owners of Formula One, if they'll let us watch the kind of 20 qualifying laps of all 20 drivers and overlay that in the same way. I'm sure there's some kind of technology that allows that.
Just to clarify, quite clear now, that's Rietveld running away with it. 2/10. It doesn't, I say running away. It doesn't seem like a lot when you compare it, but it's an infinite amount of time when you add that lap after lap after lap, because it is sort of a 30-minute race. I'd expect that to be. We're a little bit shorter lap time than we were on the Silverstone Grand Prix circuit last week. I'd expect that to be sort of 18, 19 laps.
Roughly, yeah. I mean, of course, lap time-wise before, I think we were doing what I think it was sort of 140s.
Yeah, high 140s, mid 50s.
A little bit that way. So similar lap times, of course, but again, Silverstone's a long sort of flat circuit. Zandvoort's equally sort of longish, but lots more elevation changes, a bit of a different beast in terms of tight corners. But the types of corners you've got at Zandvoort are roughly similar. It's just the elevation changes that provide the different challenge in terms of the setup, in terms of how you set up the suspension, the gearing, etc. It's all a slightly different tweaks. So they won't be running, I think, exactly the same setup they ran at Silverstone. There might be just different tweaks, maybe a base setup.
The rebound would definitely be different on the bumps.
Yeah, especially the dampers. Of course, you being a racer over in Canada, so
yeah, we've got lots of bumps over there.
Yeah,
we get frost heaves that exist even in the racing season.
But yeah, I think every driver will have a base setup, and then they'll tweak it individually in little areas depending on which circuit they're at.
Well, this circuit very tight, very narrow. Standards last week were quite good. A bit of competition in there, a bit of driving, wheel to wheel, mirror to mirror, door to door, contact here and there. I thought it was pretty clean considering what's on the line, especially for those further back on the grid that were trying to make positions. Do you think that's going to be the case here in Zandvoort? I expect a little more mistakes and inconsistency.
The thing you've got to remember is that Silverstone was a relatively wide circuit. Zandvoort isn't. It's a much more tighter, twistier beast to try and tackle effectively. And one place, if anyone's going to try and be bold and make a pass, it's through the Hunsrück section, which is that winding section after the first few corners. If anyone's brave enough to go side by side and make a move into the corner after it, which is Schivelak, again, I'll take my proverbial hat off to them, because that's not an easy place. It's just not a place you make a pass. But someone, I'm sure, tonight is going to prove us all wrong, I'm pretty sure.
And off the start, driving standards are emphasized. They have an orange section, essentially, which means double penalties. So it was very close off the start of Silverstone. It will be again here, but things will open up. They're on the formation lap. Rolling start about to begin. Round 2, rFactor. We find our next 5 qualifiers right now.
So cars are on the formation lap, side by side, rolling start, identical 650 GT3 McLarens, and getting ready for a half an hour, about 16 lap race, no pit stops, pure skill and drivers. We've seen the top 5 qualify in the Super Pole. We've got 20 drivers on circuit, and here is the grid.
So Jeffrey Rietveld, as we said, on pole position. Alongside him on the front row of the grid is Martin Stefanko. Row 2 is David Mrocek and Mitchie Hoya, with Peter Burlak in 5th and Chembol Bashi alongside him in 6th position on row 3. Row 4, Lee Morris looking to run and rebound from Silverstone last weekend. Then Jeremy Bouteloup, normally an iRacing expert, he lines up P8 on row 4. Rounding out the top 10, Miguel Balesta looking to redeem himself after the first round. And then Jaroslav Honzik from the Czech Republic in P10. Then it's up to row 6, Diogo Silva and Jimmy Nisula of Finland. Then we also got Kevin Van Duren of Holland as well. Then we go to Timu Valkojärvi of Finland and Erhan Jajowski. Then Borja Milan, Miguel Morales and David Williams, with Kirill Birakov rounding out the 20 drivers that are getting ready to start round 2 of McLaren's World's Fastest Gamer here at Zandvoort. And I'm pretty sure Rietveld and Stefanko are going to lead the charge down towards turn 1. And then from there, I guess, Ben, it's anyone's game.
Well, already some stories developing. David Williams, who was in that fastest 5, starting at the back of the field, he missed going out onto circuit. Maybe he went and got a little cup of water, went to the toilet, but he didn't get onto the grid for the start of the warm-up lap, so he starts the back of the field.
and that is going to make his work incredibly hard to do. They come through this final turn, the Arie-Luijendijk-bocht here at Zandvoort, and we're going to be going racing any moment now. Watch, the white car is rFactor, the black one beside him, Stefanko, with his teammate just behind, Mitchie Hoya. Between them is David Malchek, nice and slow.
Green
nice
flag,
and
green flag.
towards the line, and now we go racing. It's a very, very compact grid as they come towards the first turn. Is everybody going to make their way through with this big banked turn at Tarzan? It looks very, very clean to me. No contact, no cars facing the wrong direction, and very, very good driving from everybody on the back of the grid. Kirov, Birk, he's in the last car, and a good challenge from Stefanko. Tried to go around the outside of Hugenholtz, but didn't manage to make it stick. He wanted to get in front now because he doesn't want rFactor to scamper away.
Yeah, they were side by side in the first few corners, but rFactor now through the Hunterud section up towards Skivlak. He leads. Stefanko in second place, Marocek in third. Then a small gap to Mitchie Hoya. He's got Bashi all the way through him as he goes through the right-hander and up towards the end of sector 1. Burlak in sixth. Boosloop's upper place seventh past Morris. Then Silva, and looks to me as if it's in 10th place Balesta, who managed to get a clean start this time up into the top 10. So far, relatively trouble-free, but at the moment, rFactor trying to make a break.
And that's exactly what he'll want to do. He knows he's got the pace over one lap. Has he got the pace over a full race distance? It's a different type of setup for the car. If you try and go a full 30 minutes, the tyres are simulated, the wear is simulated, the circuit and the way it develops is simulated as well. And he'll be having all of that planned out in terms of setup, and hopefully he'll be able to keep this lead. Stefanko has a little bit of attention from David Malchek behind, and it was a good start from Bashi. He was outside the top 5 positions at the start. He is now in 5th position in that yellow machine, and he's pushing hard to qualify. He missed out by 1 spot last week at Silverstone. He finished 6th, and by the end it was a very lonely race for him, but he's looking to make amends this week and get himself into the top 5 of the world's fastest gamer here at Zandvoort. Wide at the second corner for Stefanko. That was a mistake.
Yep, so end of the first lap, Rietveld leads, Stefanko second, then Marocek, Hoya and Bashi. That's the top 5. Then Burlak, Bootaloop, Lee Morris down to 8th, and Diogo Silva and Miguel Balesta is as it was, pretty much as we ended the first lap. And already you can see Rietveld trying to extend that advantage as they come through the Hunterud section. See also as well, I can see Stefanko breaking away ever so slightly from Marocek. Little loose to the middle of Hunterud as they come through. Also Hoya is coming under major pressure from the yellow car of Bashi as they turn their way through the right-hander at Skivlak, and this is pretty crucial. These first few guys are going to want to try and set the pace and control the rest of the tempo with the rest of the field. So Hoya now trying to keep track with the top 3, but Bashi so far making up for missing out last week because he's keeping in the top 5 and keeping Hoya honest.
Yeah, and Hoya doesn't look particularly happy in these first couple of corners. He's already defending. It's not something we saw at Silverstone. Everyone was kind of on the racing line and being very, very well behaved. But Hoya looks like he's really, really under pressure. And here comes Bashi to the inside of the chicane. Can he get a little bit later on the brakes? He's not close enough, and that was very, very close to contact. But he managed to just about get those carbon brakes working enough. He's actually now lost some ground, and if you don't make an attack successful, then you do fall into the clutches. And look who's behind him, Peter Burjak. He was a surprise last week for not getting through.
Yeah, he was way off the pace because of the the setup, or wasn't really happy with some of the circumstances in the race that went against him, but he's up there in the top 10 where he should be. And also, shout out to Jeremy Boots, that, as we said, he's regularly a driver who races in iRacing, but he's just giving rFactor 2 a go and really just sticking it to the rest of the rFactor guys so far in P7 and having a good run so far ahead of Lee Morris in P8, who is trying to rebound. Of course, he was in 6th or 7th place at this point in time in the first few laps at Silverstone. He sat back in 8th position with a lot of work to do for the highest British driver in the field.
Bashi then getting his composure through this windy section at the back of the circuit into Skivlak. Such a tricky corner. The braking zone dives downhill, and then the circuit dives off what used to be the old Zandvoort and into the newer section built in 1990. Well, actually it wasn't 95 it was built more like in 2005. But this was a newer bit, just a small link section that took them from the very old circuit to what became the club circuit at Zandvoort. The club circuit began about now with a cut through. And Bashi, not only is he putting Hoya under pressure again, he's pulled away from Peter Burjak.
And Burlak himself is coming under massive pressure from both Bootaloo and from Morris. Morris is going with these two, so he's trying to close back in 8th position. They're starting to drop Diogo Silva in the pink car in 9th place. As we're just going to see if we can go on board with 8th place Lee Morris, who's chasing after the battling over 6th position, through the Kumo bend, now up through the Ari Limedike box, up towards the long pit straight. Exit on his crucial as he tries to stay in the slipstream down towards Tarzan, the first corner. Underneath the lap time, he's actually just a fraction slower than Bootaloo. 1:36.449 was his last lap time, through the slightly banked right-hander of Tarzan. Chasing after the Frenchman and the Croatian. A little wide over the curve from Morris. He's certainly using all the road a little bit more as they come towards Hugenholtz. Very tricky left-hander. Lots of banking here too. Several sort of banked sort of type corners. The camber sort of goes... It'll actually run faster with the corner, I think, than you actually feel you can, but these guys taking full advantage of that, and Morris is certainly keeping on the coattails, but just lacking a little bit of ultimate pace to get close to these two. As we said, it's a narrow circuit, so not really that places to overtake and get side by side.
So going a bit further forward then to the battle just ahead of them, which is Hoya and Bullet Bashi. Again, we saw this last week. Bashi is in 5th position, and therefore he's qualified. He doesn't need to challenge Mitchie Hoya, but he's a racing driver, and these guys want to go as fast as possible and go as further up as possible. Of course, if he puts Hoya behind him, he's much safer than being in 5th position, where any mistake could draw Burlak and Bootaloo into this battle. So he will want to try and get ahead, but he doesn't want to take too much of a risk, because if he does, he could compromise his whole chance of qualifying this week, and he'll then have to do it again at the international circuit at Silverstone, which, to be fair, doesn't have that many overtaking places. So this is, maybe it's tight, but there is chances to overtake, especially into the chicane. That's the best place to do it. He lined up Mitchie Hoya last time through, but wasn't able to make it stick.
Wheel spinning the inside wheel through the middle of Ari Limedike corner. That one lost him a couple of tenths and a couple of car lengths down the pit straight. And this is the crucial for Bullet Bashi, because he's got to try and close in. He's got to try and redeem himself from missing out beforehand. As you said, he is in 5th position, but it's like we saw before with the top 5 guys, where they were going to try and challenge and move up a couple of spots. But like we saw, I think, with Annie Al-Sabti and I think Graham Carroll battling over 2nd and 3rd place before. Or I think Wisniewski was in there as well. In terms of, they could attack, but there was probably the temptation, but they just didn't feel they had to, because, as I said, they were in a safe spot. They didn't really feel they had to really push too hard to kind of make that attack. They knew they were safe, bring the car home, bring it in the qualifying position, and go towards the final to prepare. So maybe Chemi's trying to do that as well and put Mitchie under initial pressure, but eventually I think he'll realise, you know what, I'm in 5th position. Hopefully there'll be a gap to Burlak and the rest behind. He doesn't need to really go and overtake. Just sit there, get the qualifying spot, and then he can relax for the next couple of weeks.
So we've lost one driver. Bojan Mila retired very early on in the race, in fact. Had a mistake and he DNF'd. And Diogo Silva has spun around, whether he was helped or not. But Silva was in the top 10 in 8th position, and now dropping further and further back. And that is a bit of a disaster. He's fallen behind David Williams. David Williams only in 15th spot, having qualified in 5th. He's been kicking himself for not getting himself onto the grid in time.
Just watching the replay myself on my screen. Just going up for the right-hander at Masters before turn 9. Got a little bit too wide on the exit of the corner, and of course, once you get 2 wheels onto the grass, just, you know, around it goes. So he's got a lot of work to do now. He's all the way back down in 16th place with lots of weight. He's going to try and close on David Williams, who actually, it's a surprise, because he was in the top 5, but again, he's another driver who seems to be quick in qualifying, but just is lacking that little bit of something in race pace. He's back down in 15th, behind Timi Valchiavi, and just not really making that much progress.
No, but he's coming onto the back of a nice train of cars led by 9th place Miguel Ballesta. Ballesta, big talking point last week after his catalogue, really, of errors, not only in qualifying but then at the start of the race. He's actually brought a friend of his that speaks better English to sit next to him. He's flown him from Poland, so they are, where are they? Ballesta is from Spain, and his Polish friend is doing the translation of race control and perhaps what we're saying as well. Ballesta is sitting in 9th position. He's out of that top 5, but at least he understands what's going on now, and he won't make so many errors. He was so apologetic, he was so sad about qualifying in the top 5 and then being disqualified after his first lap. Misdemeanors at Silverstone, but not showing the star quality pace that we saw last time out, and he's falling behind Lee Morris, who's in 8th. There's a big gap between the two of them, and he's got Honsnik, Mohamed Patel behind him, Jimmy Nisela and Kevin Van Doren. A little queue of cars there, and there's some very, very good quality drivers. You know, we're talking about the top 5, but someone like Mohamed Patel is a GT Academy finalist.
Yeah, and also he's very strong in rFactor in the Formula Sim Racing single-seater championship. But of course, as we said, single-seater and Grand Prix racing is one thing. GT racing is completely another in terms of grip levels and pace and speed. But Patel is a very capable driver. He's also raced in Tin Top Sim Racing championships as well. And he's just in the mix as well. He's trying to close off the back of Hans Lick as they come down the pit straight up towards Tarzan again. This is on lap, I believe it's lap 8 we're on now, with just over 10-20 minutes to go. And he's just tries to make an attack into Tarzan, but just not quite close enough to pull himself alongside. And I think what's going to be crucial with these guys, Ben, in this long train, is the run off the final corner down the pit strip, because if you can get a good run off Barry line that corner, that will set you up in the slipstream to try and move out towards the inside of Tarzan. If you can make a move stick there, that's probably one of your prime passing spots, along with the chicane towards the end of a lap.
However, one of the things you can do with the Tarzan corner, because of the banking, is you can turn in early. And the front still sticks. You don't have to have that conventional line that is wide on entry, take the apex and then wide on exit. So there's a kind of a natural defence mechanism there, and Patel looks very, very strong into the Tarzan chicane, but wasn't able to get alongside, and is still pushing very, very hard. But the thing is, these guys were separated by 0.4 of a second. All 20 runners were separated by just 0.4 and can't find an advantage. Let's switch back then to the battle for 4th position. Mitchie Hoya is once again under pressure from Cem Bunabashi.
Yeah, up towards the S-bend at the end of the second sector, under brakes, and Cem just closes back in again, takes a lot more curb on the first part of the S. He's now through the sweeping left-hander that opens out again towards the last couple of corners. Still a bit of a twitch of oversteer from Hoya, feeling a tiny bit of pressure, but he's holding on well as they brake for the right-handed, because they sort of initially brake for the first part, just a small dab to kind of grab the apex as they come through Kuma, then through a long corner, and he's oversteering again through Mitchie Hoya, but again just a bit of a twitch as he holds on, but it seems to be enough pace, enough speed to actually even start to pull away from Cem at the moment. So looks as though that run off the final corner was actually, even though it looked a little bit twitchy, was pretty supreme up as they come up towards Tarzan. He's holding the advantage well.
Yeah, absolutely. The car had definitely had a 5% slip angle, but it definitely drove off the corner, even though it was sliding, in a way that Cem Bunabashi looked far cleaner, but didn't have the same acceleration. Through the slower stuff, though, through these hairpins, Bunabashi looked so much stronger. And now these really tricky corners out towards Schlevak, over 2 browser hills. You can't see where the apexes are, and there's a lot of bumps to try and throw the car off circuit. Behind, Bergelac is under pressure from Bouteloup, the Frenchman, who is actually based just outside Paris in a small town called Chaville. And Chaville is very famous, very famous to certain people in the world, for being the base of MotoTV.
Ah, fantastic. Which is now
little known useless fact for you, Scott.
Yeah, because that's now become motorsport.tv in recent weeks, but MotoTV was usually a staple of obviously people who are going to watch TV on Sky and satellite. But of course, enough of MotoTV. This is McLaren World's fastest gamer, and of course Peter Berlak is holding on as best as he can, desperately to P6. Of course, he's the, as kind as I can put it, the best of the rest, so to speak, in 6th position. And he's keeping Jerry Bridges with him. And I have to say, credit to Lee Morris for holding on in 8th position. Of course, he's staying there in the moment. He retired from the first class after he spun out. I think he would admit it was a mistake all of his own making. I think he fully admits that. But he was having trouble with the car setup and just couldn't make the car work eventually. And then for a while he was actually up there as effectively the fastest qualifier, because the actual fastest qualifier for a while was Graham Carroll, one of our existing finalists. But of course, as it works, if you're already qualified, then that time doesn't count. So effectively he was top man in terms of qualifying before the likes of Rietveld and Rocek and Stefanko usurped him and found a couple more tenths. But you can see that Morris's car's working the bumps well, and he's keeping both these cars honest. So both Bouteloup and Berlak, if they start to scrap too much and start to fall into the clutches of this guy, he can take full advantage, and then have to be aware, of course, that Bunabashi and Hoya are not that far away to take advantage of.
Bouteloup at the moment looking very, very strong. He qualified in 25th position in the first round, in round 1, so he didn't actually make it. He was one of the reserves, and we have dipped into our reserves each week just simply because these guys have other lives. There's a guy, Arnaud Lacombe, who qualified both weeks in the top 20, but he's got a kid, so he can't race on Sunday nights. Just kind of proving that he can do it.
Yeah, and of course, when it comes to that, childcare is more important at the moment than sim racing in some cases. Of course, you have to look after your offspring.
In some cases, Scott.
Well, it depends on what people's priorities are, I guess, in certain parts of the world. But it looks as though he's got his priorities right at the moment. But I'm sure that if he can find the time for the international circuit, he'll be back to prove his point. He's basically said, you know, guys, I am one of the faster guys out there, but at the moment, you know, I know where my priorities possibly lies. Kevin Van Duren being right in the background. He's having a move up the inside into the chicane, side by side with Yimi Nisela, the Finn, through the Part of the S, they're side by side still. They've gone side by side pretty much all the way through the S bend, but it's Van Duren with the inside line through Kumo, turns in and says, cheers, Jamie, that was relatively straightforward.
A fantastic move because it took 3 corners to do it. He lined him up in the back section of turns when they were going through Slovak. There was a little bit of contact between the two of them. And eventually, when he got to the chicane, he managed to make it stick. And it's Nussela who's going backwards. Here comes David Williams now to the inside at Tarzan. And Williams is going to take the apex quite nicely from Nussela. Lovely move. And, the Finn will be frustrated with himself there. He's dropped from 12th down to 14th position in the space of 3 or 4 laps. And he'll now really want to settle himself down. Interesting to see David Williams has come from dead last at the 13th. Nobody else really has made any overtaking manoeuvres, but Williams has been pushing himself forward. He'll be kicking himself not to be in the top 5. That has stayed pretty much the same. We should kind of reference the fact that there's a Dutchman at the Dutch track leading by 3.2 seconds. Jeffrey Reitfeld ahead of Martin Stefanko, David Malchek in 3rd position, and then the battle for 4th between Mitchie Hoya and Cem Bullet-Bashi. Then a small gap, Peter Berjak and Jeremy Bouteloup and Lee Morris. Then the gap with Balesta and Hozik and Patel. And then the one that we were just watching with Nussela, Williams and Kevin Van Doren, the second of the 2 Dutchmen racing here. As I say, 13 different nations from Russia, Portugal, Finland, Netherlands, Spain, UK, Macedonia, Czech Republic, Croatia. And the youngest of our drivers, 18 years old, Miguel Merles, the oldest, Borja Milan. Well, he was the oldest, but he retired. He's our only retirement, the 30-year-old, out of the race at the first lap.
Battle for 6th position, we really have to keep on looking at it because Peter Berlin is not being allowed to relax one iota by Jeremy Bouteloup or Lee Morris as they head down towards Tarzan again. We're on, I think, lap 11 or lap 12. Yes, there's lap 12 actually. We completed 11 laps. We're on lap 12. We've just gone past the halfway point in this second qualifying round of the rFactor 2 finals of McLaren's World Fastest Gamer. Top 5 is, at the moment, seems to be pretty much set, but in terms of the title of best of the rest, Peter Berlach has been given the massive hurry up by both Jeremy Bouteloup and Lee Morris. This is the closest battle on track for me, and the most crucial because, of course, if any of these top 5 slip up, the guy who's at the head of this 3-car train is going to be the one that benefits instantly if they can stay there and get that final qualifying spot. So this could be a pretty decisive battle if things kick off in front of them.
Well, the other question is, does Jeremy Bouteloup have any extra pace? Is Berlach actually holding him up? And if he gets past, can he then start making inroads into the guy ahead? It's difficult to tell because he's so stuffed up behind Berlach that he can't really do a clear lap. So Berlach is in 6th position. Bouteloup will pass him but not progress into the world's fastest gamer finals. He'll need another position, but there'll be some clear track ahead of him, and he can pull up to the back of Cem Bullet-Bashi and then put Cem under huge pressure. And he'll know all about that from last week. That one's quite close enough as they come down into chicane to make a move this time through, taking plenty of curb and more. The McLaren 650S GT3 car coping with the bumps, coping with the traction losses, and still looking absolutely stunning. Interesting that they had a slight physics change in the car to just spice things up a little bit for these drivers. They would have spent loads of time trying to get a decent setup, and then that might have changed a little bit having had that sort of slight physics change. And you can certainly see it if you ride on board with the cars, because the steering wheel is far less aggressively used than we saw at Silverstone, especially through those slower turns.
Yeah, and that's because it demands a different kind of setup, because throw the car into the corners with the high-speed bends that you have at Silverstone. With this one, it requires a little bit more steer angle, a little bit more steering lock in terms of the responsiveness and the sensitivity. So maybe that's a factor on these guys. But possibly we can ride on board with a view that almost one of the best views in the house, I guess, which is 8th place Lee Morris. Now he's just chasing after these two that are battling between Berlach and Bouteloup, and these guys really are going at it. He's just sat there thinking, just carry on, boys. If one of you guys slips up, I can take the pair of you if you don't mind. Now, interestingly enough, is that you said that these guys actually were kind of taking a bit of trouble, as we seem to have lost Diogo Silva. In fact, Diogo Silva out of the race, I'm afraid, so he's our second retirement. He was the pink car, which was up as high as about 14th, 15th place. He was the one that initially spun earlier on and then dropped way down the order, but I'm afraid that he is out of the running. But speaking about Lee Morris, of course, these guys, looking at the lap times last time around, you can tell in some cases that they're being a little bit held up, because Berlach did a 36.5. It was Bouteloup with 36.6, and Morris did a 36.5 as well. So he's the one that's benefiting here. The fact that I think Bouteloup, to answer your question from earlier on, Ben, he has got some extra pace. It's just that he's having to go at the same pace that Berlach is because he can't get past. And Boris has got slightly clearer air, sitting back a tiny bit, so he's not getting too much turbulent air in front. because of that, he's lapping about a tenth or so quicker, and that's why he's able to keep on the tail of these two and just keep them under pressure.
Through the Ari Lineup box and down the start-finish straight with the old grandstand and dunes to the left-hand side. Bouteloup takes a quick look to the inside of Tarzan, but can't find a way through. They're so close between the two of them. And if we ride on board with Lee Morris behind, he's got one of the best seats in the house, sitting just behind that turquoise blue McLaren 650S, and every so often you get a glimpse of the red one of Bergerac just ahead of him. And Morris, I think, he feels a little bit held up here as well. Certainly a lot of work going on the steering wheel, but you get the feeling that even Lee Morris could go slightly faster in certain parts of the circuit. Now through these really tricky left-right, the car hooks well, but he came out the throttle on the top of that hill. He wasn't confident enough to keep it nailed at the very, very top, and that's proof as just how close to the edge these cars are. That should be a really easy flat corner, but of course it's going over a rise and a few bumps, but instead Lee Morris was off throttle, and Bergerac has missed the apex a little bit. Can Bouteloup now take advantage? Oh, it's incredibly close between the two of them. It's not an overtaking chance yet. You've got to wait until we get to the chicane, but as we saw a little bit earlier with Kevin Doran, it takes about 3 corners to do it. Here they come to the braking zone. Is he going to dive to the inside? No.
Not quite close up on that one. Took a lot of curve on the first part of the S's, and again, look at that, he tried to take so much speed through the second part, but it was just no room because Bergerac had his car parked on the apex and couldn't take advantage of it. So they come back through the Kumo corner up towards Ari Lineup once again. So, but if you think Morris is getting frustrated, Bouteloup must be absolutely tearing his hair out behind Bergerac at this point in time. Onto the pit straight again, Bouteloup trying to keep in the slipstream, and everyone seems to be pairing off there in front of them. I think there's a good scrap going on between for P2 and for P4 because Stefanko and Marocek have sort of got their own battle, as have Hoya and Bullet. Bashin looks like Bouteloup missed the apex a little bit through the first part of Tarzan, as puts Morris back into play, lost a couple of car lengths, and now it's gone from the hunter to the hunted because Bouteloup has now got Morris filling his rearview mirrors into the Hugenholtz hairpin. And now, rather than attacking Bergerac, he's now going to try and get his elbows out and make that 650S the widest thing in the venue because Morris is on the prowl.
I think what's really significant here, Scott, is just how professional these drivers are being. It's so hard to overtake around the Zandvoort circuit, and if you were watching the DTM races over the weekend, you'd have seen far less professional driving in a professional series than we're seeing here this evening. These guys are being super clean, absolutely no contact. They know, of course, that if they do make contact, they'll damage their car and they'll cause problems to the handling of the cars, but that's the same thing in DTM, and these guys are smashing each other to bits over the weekend.
It's one thing I've seen before in a couple of sim races, very high-profile sim races for championships and leagues. I've actually compared the starts from an actual sim racing league to the exact identical cars, the exact same identical track in terms of the championship, and I guarantee you the sim races were cleaner, believe it or not, off the start. So it's incredible how these cars obviously aren't real cars, but they drive exactly as effectively. You know, you smash it up and that's about what? Several £1,000s worth of damage in terms of that, so they really do drive it professionally. And of course that's the thing that McLaren have to look out for, which is professionalism. Of course, if you've got somebody who's barging people out away and urging penalties, effectively, yes, they might be quick, but effectively, are they really McLaren material? And probably the answer is going to be for them in terms of the final outcome, maybe sort of, yes, you're quick, but if you can't respect each other on track and run cleanly and do things without contact or running off and taking shortcuts, the answer, I'm sure, to that question from McLaren probably would be no.
I think we've seen Jaroslav Honzik off circuit further back, dropping down positions into the pits, in fact, for Honzik. So why would he be going into the pits, Scott?
Possibly he may have had a little bit of damage, possibly he may have had some issues which maybe changes tyres or whatever it might be, but I think potentially he may have possibly whacked the wall and caused a little bit of damage, which for that would cause him to get that repaired and sit there for a while. So that's cost him a little bit of time. Whether he can try and get himself back out again for the next qualifiers at the Silverstone International next weekend will be something to have to work on. But for him, it seems to be pretty dire straits for that car, back down in 18th place and back out on circuit, it seems.
Yeah, he's come back out onto track, but and therefore has not DNF. We've seen a couple of cars that have decided to take no further part here. But Jaroslav Honzik, another of those very, very experienced drivers. Interesting to see that he's actually won the BMW BMW 130 championship, which in real life. So he's a guy that has not only done sim racing, but also done real racing himself. And what was most interesting about him, for me anyway, that he's run the half marathon on the Great Wall of China.
I've got all sorts of random facts for you, but we'll save them to when they're necessary.
Well, at least when it comes to actually any sort of athletic work, if he does get through, if he does eventually get through, he'll be someone who passes that athletic fitness test. Because of course, if he can run a half marathon on the Great Wall of China, then I'm pretty sure he can manage a few press-ups and a couple of sit-ups and say, yeah, you'll do an F1 car.
And you've got to remember that these guys are qualifying. The top 5 are qualifying into the final that's happening on the 3rd of September, and then only the winner of this group from that September will go through to the interview stage in McLaren in November time, and they'll join the iRacing lot, and they'll join all those different types of platforms of gaming that you can have around different platforms, different even handheld mobile games. You can actually compete and qualify into that November final.
You can. That's the Gear Club app, so if you want to get yourself involved in that, you can do. We've got another pit call, I'm afraid. Erhan Yoyoski is in the pit lane. He's back down to 17th, I'm afraid. So actually, Honzik goes past him and actually goes up a spot, so he's trying to recover. A couple of battles down the order. We've got a scrap going on towards the back of the field, which may as well acknowledge them as they're still in the race. They did qualify for the top 20. We've got back down in 15th place, Miguel Morales, who is scrapping with Kirill Birakov. Their nose to tail through the Hunsrug section, through the escape black section downhill, and Birakov is trying to keep him honest here as they come up towards the end of the first sector into turns 8, 9 and 10. Good scrap going on towards the bottom there, and it's a good thing in terms of some drivers will be sort of out on their own, including our leader, of course, which is a certain Jeffrey Rietveld, who is out by almost just over 4 seconds, if you like. Whereas these guys here sort of down the bottom way in the mid-pack have got someone to race with, and of course that will mean they're not exactly where they want to be, but they're still enjoying a good race out there nonetheless, so that's a quite key thing. But
also, let's remind everybody that we had nearly 700 unique entrants this week. Not as many as we had for the first week, but that's probably a reflection of how tough this circuit is. Over 700 people set a time. Only 20 of them have competed today. And that, therefore, is a huge achievement just to get into this race. And I think that's, again, a massive reflection on how professional we're seeing these drivers and how much they desperately want to be recognised by McLaren and then represented at the world's fastest game of finals. And there's still great battles to be had out on circuit. Going back again to that battle for 6th position, Peter Burlak and Jeremy Bootloop absolutely locked together, but you have to say that Cem Bulutbashi is kind of starting to fall into their clutches. Maybe he's overheated his tyres and done too much.
Yeah, he's starting to let Mitchie Hoya fall a little bit away from him as they come through the Skavlak right-hander. Maybe that's possibly, but it's a little bit wide from Burlak behind them. He's starting to feel the pressure a little bit, and this brings Bootloop back into play. You can tell how hard they're pushing because they're taking such a big bite of curb on the apex of turn 8, now through turn 9 again. But you have to admit, I'm absolutely right on that one, Ben, is that I think maybe possibly Bulutbashi is just taking a little bit too much out of his tyres, pushing a little bit too hard, trying to keep on the back of Mitchie Hoya. But again, he knows he's in at the moment a top 5 spot, but effectively I don't think, with the rate these guys are closing in, I don't think it's safe by any margin, even though we've still got just under 4 minutes to go.
Yes, exactly, just 4 minutes to go, so we're only going to get a couple more laps to make passes, but Bulutbashi is definitely fading into the clutches here of Burlak. We may well see a change for 5th position on the very last couple of laps of this race, and that will really frustrate Jeremy Bootloop because he's been staring at 6th all the way through, hasn't managed to find a way through into 6th position, and if that 6th position becomes 5th spot, he'll miss out by 1 place, and that's what happened to Cem Bulutbashi last time through. It all stays the same going through the hairpin at Tarzan, and it all looks very settled and sorted.
A little bit of oversteer as he comes up towards Hugenholtz, but you can tell that Burlak is also pushing down the pit straight. Bootloop just put himself into Burlak's mirrors, just thinking, I'm just going to let you know I'm still here. Or another twitch as well from Burlak to the middle part of Hunsrug there. That could put him under pressure again as they come up towards the top of the crest, up towards Skavlak. You see Bootloop taking a tighter line up to the final part of that section, up towards the downhill right-hander. And they're still pushing through, but Hoya's still safe in 4th. Then we have Bulutbashi in 5th, and then Burlak just continuing to push on. And Bootloop must be spitting feathers there, saying, come on, I've got to try and find a way here through because he's running out of time and opportunities. There's 2.5 minutes to go. This is for a qualifying spot, and if Burlak can't get through, if Bootloop can't get through, it could possibly be checkmate for all of them.
Well, look out for the white flag.
I think they've just got a notification saying it's possibly just last lap, I think. Or it'll make up on their screen that they're going to get last lap. But even so, I have to say, speaking of which, we've almost forgotten that there's a guy leading this race. He's basically leading at his home circuit, and his name is Jeffrey Rietveld. And quite frankly, we haven't had to talk about him because effectively, Ben, he's had no one to challenge him in the politest possible way. He's dominated the race so far. He's coming on to the final lap, and of course it's not definitive just yet. We're on to the last 2.86 miles of the Zandvoort Grand Prix circuit, but it looks as though in about the next couple of minutes, Ben, we're going to get our second winner of the qualifying rounds, and so far it's looking pretty good.
And here comes Boutaloop down the inside of Bergerac. He's had to wait to the final turn, the final lap, into the Tarzan hairpin, the first corner of the lap, but he's managed to make it stick. It was a great move. He lined him up through Harry Lindyke all the way down the straight and into the first turn. But is it enough? Has he got enough to pounce on Cem Bulutbashi on the final couple of corners? Watch now as we see Jeremy Boutaloop from France chase down Cem Bulutbashi from Turkey and try and get one final spot into the finals, the world fastest game in rFactor 2 competition. Boutaloop pushing super hard, but has he left it too late? The white flag is out. One final turn of this Zandvoort circuit for Jeffrey Rietveld, who has been super in control at the front of the field, but there's still much to play for further back. Hoya and Bulutbashi are under threat from Boutaloop, Jeremy Boutaloop, the Frenchman, in a turquoise machine. He's made up one position already. Can he make up one more?
Have to try and wait and see as they head up to the final couple of corners. As we look towards the front again, Jeffrey Rietveld, pretty much a flawless drive from start to finish. Last couple of corners, I think you're looking here, he's going to join his countryman Rudy van Buren to not only qualify, but to win a qualifying race, and quite convincingly so.
Absolutely faultless drive from Jeffrey Rietveld, who comes towards the line and takes the checkered flag here at Zandvoort. Not only does he win, but he wins at his home event. The Dutch driver is going to be absolutely happy with that. But he has looked like the class of the field throughout the whole week. He has been absolutely faster than everybody else. 2/10 faster in the time trials, 2/10 faster in qualifying. He dominated the Super Pole, and he has put in a flawless drive throughout these 20 laps, and that's exactly what McLaren want. They want flawless drives. To be fair though, behind them, Martin Stefanko, after missing out last week, has got through this week with another very, very strong drive, 4 seconds down the road. And then David Marchek in third position. We didn't see him last week, but he's straight through along with Mitchie Hoya. And Cem Bulutbashi will be very, very happy because he held off Jeremy Boutaloop. He missed out last week, but he's in this week, the Turkish driver, and a very friendly character on online as well. So big support. He has a big support from Matt as well. He loves Matt. He can't wait to meet him. But Cem Bulutbashi is our 5th qualifier, and Jeremy Boutaloop, well, he's going to have to come back next week and maybe make the move a little bit earlier in the race because he left it to the very, very last lap.
He did, but effectively the question is, if you're not there on the last one, all the others count for nothing. So he basically got it done exactly what he needed to. We were setting him up lap after lap. Finally, his patience almost ran out, shot up the inside. Thank you very much on that one, Peter, and up to P6. Now, like I said, he is best of the rest. And of course, the likes of him, Bergerac has to come back for a 3rd week, as does Lee Morris. And potentially, if they can get themselves in the good contention, of course, they're back at Silverstone on the international circuit. And I wonder possibly, these 3 guys, I'm sure, Boutaloop, Bergerac and Morris, provided what everyone else does, I think possibly they could be the prime movers to get themselves a qualifying spot next week.
Well, save your words, Scott, because we've got plenty to dissect from this race. Lots to look out for, and we're going to go through the whole race and give you replays and analysis from the full team here at Silverstone. What a fantastic professional competition we've had. The round 2 rFactor winner is Jeffrey Rietveld.
Well, Dutch domination for the 2nd week in a row. Rudy van Buren looked unbeatable at Silverstone. Jeffrey Rietveld looks absolutely untouchable in all fashions. If Hamilton had a Grand Slam in Canada this year in Formula One, I don't know what you call this. Qualifies first to get into the race, qualifies first in qualifying, Super Pole and flag-to-flag victory. I think fastest lap was in there. He will make it through to the finals in 2 weeks' time. Alongside him, Martin Stefanko, David Marchek, Mitchie Hoya, who of course had that penalty in Super Pole, had to start 5th and then made up for it, and Cem Bulutbashi, who was 1 position away last week at Silverstone Grand Prix. Zandvoort, he does one better and actually gets a chance now in the finals in 2 weeks' time. Another great race, Ben, I have to say, competitive. I love Zandvoort off the start because the camber in the Tarzan hairpin allowed for some side-by-side. I think all the way down the grid for about 6 rows, it was side-by-side for about 3 or 4 corners.
Yeah, and had Martin Stefanko got past going into through those first couple of corners, I think the race would have been very, very different. Jeffrey Reitveld had dominated, and I'm sure Martin knew that, and he knew that he needed to, as soon as possible, get ahead, and then they can have their battle. And obviously after 20 laps, I'm sure Reitveld would have found a way through, but as it happened, they played fair, and I think that was what struck me about that whole race. They were so fair. There was very little contact. There was no one trying to knock each other around and spinning around. We saw a couple of mistakes from drivers and a couple of DNFs.
Yes.
But there wasn't the kind of the fiery racing that actually, had we been at Zandvoort properly this weekend with the DTM, these guys are knocking the hell out of each other. And here we have professional drivers showing what they can do for McLaren.
And I think that's a good point. I have to pick up on that because you would have expected, okay, Silverstone's one thing, big, wide circuit, you know, a lot smoother. You can be more disciplined and smooth on your inputs, which creates maybe some more tire life. Here, I expected tires to drop off. I expected people to be missing braking points or, you know, running a little bit wide here and there, which would allow some maybe cheeky little overtakes or at least someone diving a nose in and then contact. You know, I would expect it to be more drama. I'm not sure if it's because everyone wants to be so disciplined based on what's on the line or if these guys are just that nice to each other.
I think it's Ed. I think they're scared of Ed in race control, to be honest. I would be.
He's a frightening guy. I listened to his driver briefing, and I got to say, you know, karting is not really high-end, if you will, but, you know, karting briefings and all race briefings I've been, he is way more strict than any race director I ever had.
Absolutely.
He is to the point, he is dead on, like, Ballista, you better learn the English or get your translator on it because Ed's not messing around.
I think the thing is that race director is your headmaster.
Yes.
He dresses like a headmaster as well. You'll get to see, well, you saw him earlier. But that then filters down into the drivers, it filters down into every part of the organisation. If you've got a good headmaster, then all your pupils, all your drivers will also behave, and I think that he's set a precedent by being super strict, and we're seeing that with all the drivers, and that's exactly what McLaren want. That's what we want to see. McLaren want a guy who's going to sit there for 200 laps, do exactly what he's told, and not make any mistakes. And I think both winners, and probably all the top 10 drivers that we've seen so far qualify, have that discipline and seem to be incredibly consistent and strong.
Yeah, very consistent all the way through. And again, Zandvoort, I did not expect that, I have to say. I expected someone to be off in the weeds. It's a very tough track. It's a driver's track, I think. Yeah. It's a track that I very much feel satisfied with when I do a good lap in any sim. Doesn't matter if it's rFactor, iRacing, doesn't matter. I feel very, very good about it. But if you're in a race, it's a lot of pressure because all those bumps, all those apexes at high speed entrances, I never do well in a race there, ever. I never am able to hold it together. So it's impressive that all of these 20 drivers, although, again, you did say there was, I think, 2 DNFs, most of them held it together for as long as they did.
Yeah, and especially when you look at the unofficial practice. When they open the server, we get loads of guys logging on quickly, and we had guys doing over 100 laps in practice. There were so many errors, people falling off and spinning and all kinds of stuff like that. So it was amazing to see that that didn't happen in our race. And we're unlikely to see it going forward because Silverstone, you can kind of get away with it, and we're in the international circuit and then the national circuit the next couple of weeks.
Well, we've got our drivers, joining us inside of TeamSpeak. Now, 3rd place, and I believe it was Morchek that actually crossed the line in that position. So, Son, congratulations to you. A tough race start all the way through. It was a late green flag call, bunched up the grid, but you were able to hold position and then run your laps.
Yeah, thank you. Actually, I had some luck because in quali I was 5th place, but then I think Williams disappeared, and Mitchie Hoya was moved back a few places behind, so it was a little bit lucky for me. But then the race was, I think, I was calm.
You were calm.
The race.
Well, it's hard to stay calm, and then we will touch on the David Williams point in a minute. As you mentioned, he didn't make the start. We'll talk about how that has effects in the sim and how he was able to join still. But Hoyer's penalty moved you up, and I said hold position. Did it at any point, you know, tires? I know Williams trying to fight back through the field had some issues. Did you have any setup issues on a bumpy track? How much had to change throughout the race compared to your practice laps?
You know, during the race, I think we were all very far from actual limits of the circuit. I think during the practice we were much closer to it, but during the race we were actually scared to use all the track.
Yeah, there's a couple cut spots I think actually, Jaroslav Horček, I think it was, that got a penalty to stop and go late. So it was an issue. We didn't
That's what
see
they were.
Exactly. So yeah. So and so it's basically 3 cuts, I believe. Horček, you can correct me on this if I'm wrong. 3 cuts and it's a stop and go. Is that correct?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So it can kill a race pretty quickly. It would be something that's quite timid. How much did you have to dial back your level of aggression, knowing sort of what's on the line with McLaren in this contest?
I was something like half a second slower than in the practice.
Wow. Did you feel like that was the case with most people? Did everyone sort of seem more timid? Were you worried that anyone might throw a move on you at that point in time?
I think only Jeffrey Ritfield was on the limit. Everyone else was much slower.
Yeah, he was flying.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you very much for joining us, and congratulations, and we'll see you in 2 weeks' time. Get practicing on that Silverstone National Circuit. There's not too many corners to learn.
I think it will be pretty random race, to be honest.
Yeah, well, when you've got that many close drivers that have already been successful in this contest, it certainly will. Listen, thank you very much. Congratulations in withstanding a lot of pressure throughout. We've actually got a replay of this start ready to roll, which I do want to show. So just to touch on it, we'll come back to it. David Williams, you have basically 30 seconds to join the grid. He failed to do so because it's a rolling start. When they did go, basically the game goes live off the standing start. They do a formation. He was able to join the back, but that moved, obviously, as Horček said, him up 1 position. He was already moved up when Hoya got the penalty, but it was a late green flag call. It only went green just now as they crossed under the gantry and heading into the Tarzan curve. This is my point. You can take sort of a wider line, especially when you're side by side and limiting the person on the inside. The camber allows you to get on the power. So these guys had a great race. In fact, Rietveld was the guy that actually was on the outside and had to fight back heading into the 2nd and 3rd corners.
But that's the beauty of this first section of turns, because it's winding left, right. You do have the ability, as you say, to run side by side, and then it's kind of who's going to be brave enough through into this corner, the Hugenholzbach. Because again, it's got camber, so you can go around the outside if you want, but you have to be super brave that somebody's not going to then run you wide on the outside and over the grass.
Yeah, well, and talking about limits, dialing it back, he said Rietveld was the only one on the limit. Horček, Stefanko kind of got a bit of a gap. He was sort of he wasn't on Rietveld's pace, but he was able to break away from sort of the next trio of cars. Horček actually had a queue behind him for, I think, probably about 10 laps, and that's a lot of pressure because it wasn't like last week where we had 5 drivers in the lead, queue of 4 behind Van Buren, and then the 6th place driver, which Ken Bulik-Bashi was at that point in time, sort of far enough back that the front 4 could say, okay, we're in the top 5 positions, we don't need to do anything. There was pressure all the way back to 7th and 8th place.
Oh, yeah.
So it was very quick and that's sort of where I got to the question with Horček. Did he feel pressure? Because it's very quick to get to that point where someone just says, no, I'm going up the inside. I don't feel comfortable. I've got people breathing down my neck. I want into the finals. And I thought it might kick off at that point.
What's interesting is what he said about feeling scared. He's not scared of making a mistake. He's scared of the computer and the race control giving him a penalty, and therefore he's staying away from those curbs. And it was just what we were talking about. The precedent was set for a professional encounter, and the rules were highly enforced, and the drivers were scared of those rules. And you know what? That doesn't happen very often in the real world.
No.
But people take and flaunt rules a lot.
And there's a bit of gray area. I mean, we talked about, especially with track limits being so kind of argy-bargy. You get a transponder in there. Sometimes it doesn't pick up. People bend those rules. In the sim, it's dead accurate. So those 3 and a penalty, as we saw applied in this race, can be very scary. Now, Martin Stefanko is joining us. 2nd place for him. 2nd off the line. Martin, you nearly had a sniff at the lead going into sort of turn 3 coming out of the Tarzan hairpin.
Yeah, indeed. The only way to really take the lead, I knew that the only way to do it was right at the start, so I tried to do it, went down the inside, and we were still side by side. Eventually, he got the advantage coming into turn 3-4. And after that, I knew that I wasn't going to get past because he had insane pace, big respect for him. And after that, like I said, I knew that I wasn't going to get past, so I just tried to save the tires, play the long game, and tried to hold off Horček, and it worked out perfectly. It didn't make any mistakes really, and what can I say?
Martin, you were one of the guys who we saw last week racing at Silverstone Grand Prix track. What made the difference this week to get you into the top 5, whereas you were outside it last week?
well, we worked a lot on the setup. We have made some big improvements for this round, and I gotta thank a lot for that to my team, Avid Chronic Racing. They've done an amazing job on the car, even though that there are still improvements to be made. Yeah, they've done an insane job on the car. So yeah, that really made the difference there to get closer to the front runners.
How much hours do you think collectively as a team did you guys put into finding the setup that you effectively ran with today?
That's tough to say. I'd say around an hour a day. So you got around a week of preparation. So I'd say close to 10 hours or thereabout.
And you were your teammates were Mitchie Hoya.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, so a few names involved in that, and obviously Mitchie had a good race as well, being fourth. So you're both through to the final week. Zandvoort's a very bumpy circuit. You go back to sort of the Silverstone for the final week. Does that mean you guys are going to sort of revisit that setup now immediately? Is that something that you guys will start practicing for? Because remember, winner take all once you hit sort of 2 weeks time from now, the final of the rFactor qualifiers.
Yeah, of course, every circuit is different, so we're going to have to work on the setup right away, and yeah, we're gonna get to it and try to do the best job we can, and see where we end up in the end.
All right. Well,
awesome.
Yeah, congratulations. Very, very controlled race, and hey, good try off the start. I have to say, Rietveld was sort of an alien in his own world in this race, but you've done enough. You're into that final race. That's all that matters at this point. So hey, get to work on that setup. Work with Hoya. You guys are both going to be there, so perhaps something in that, maybe a little bump draft in qualifying leading into the Super Bowl. But congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, very good. I was kind of surprised as well at seeing how well he was controlled in his pace, because like I say, he did have a sniff, but then once he got a gap on the second place guys, he just managed his race, and he looked smooth throughout. In fact, I think he probably had the least amount of camera time of anyone because he had no dramas.
Yeah, it was a bit of a shame actually. Those first couple of cars really weren't seen, were they? Because we had some great battling on the very fringes of the top five, and the other guys were kind of very much in their safety zone. I think as the guys were saying just now, they were driving within their limits, were driving with the limits of the circuit. They knew without mistakes they would qualify, and that's really the priority today, was to qualify into the September final. If they didn't do it today, then they'd have to do it next week, and I think pressure next week on the international circuit is going to be much heightened, because that's really one of the last chances.
Well, this man, listen, takes shades of both Rudy van Buren, his countryman, the fellow Dutchman who's already qualified from last week and won last week's race. Remember, they do get Logitech and Sparco gear for each of their victories in these qualification races. But he also took Enzo Benito from before that, who, by the way, Benito was on vacation this week. That's why he's not here. But qualified first leading into this, qualifying first in lead up to the race, super pole win, fastest lap, domination. This is even better than Rudy van Buren went last week.
Yeah, I hadn't really put two and two together and realised we've got two Dutch winners, and certainly with Verstappen being kind of the belle of the Formula One ball at the moment.
And a big sim racer.
And a massive sim racer. If he can't be in a go-kart, then he's on a sim, or he's in a Formula One car. I mean, literally, he went to Zandvoort today just for fun to go and watch the DTM race.
Yeah, probably. That doesn't surprise me. He's probably relaxing on the beach now with them after their. Although I think it was a little wet there today too, wasn't it?
No, it's always sunny in Zandvoort. It's a beachside resort.
I'm sorry. How dare I forget? Always sunny in Philadelphia. Always sunny in Zandvoort. Listen, congratulations, Jeffrey. You absolutely dominated this. We didn't see you last week in Silverstone, and then you come out of nowhere. You come out of the woodwork and just absolutely laid it down this week.
Yeah, thanks a lot. It was a great race. Last week I actually qualified for the race on Sunday, but I was on holiday in New York, so it was not possible for me to drive. And this week I had some practice with Cem Buluk-Bassi, and we made a setup quickly, and everything went all right, I guess.
Well, that's double teammates that have made it through, because Buluk-Bassi obviously comes in fifth. How much? I guess a question to ask. We didn't really ask Stefanacek, but the setup difference from Silverstone to Zandvoort, how much was different?
It wasn't that different, to be honest, but we found a few more things in the setup that made the car easier to drive in the long run. Yeah, of course, your usual difference. We tweaked the wing a bit, dampers, and just made sure that the car was easy to drive, even in a hot lap.
And I think it looked, certainly visually from the outside, the car looked so much more stable, your car, than many others. And I guess, did that give you extra confidence to find that? I mean, basically all week long you've been 2 tenths faster than everybody else.
Yeah, I think if you have a car that drives like really safe, you can really push it. And now in the race, I was actually just maintaining the gap to the P2 guy, to Martin, just to make sure I wouldn't overheat the tires and make any mistakes. So I think driving cleanly with this car is definitely the fastest way to go, and especially on the long run.
Is Zandvoort a place that you've visited before? Have you driven around that circuit for real?
Yeah, I've driven in a friend's car. A 106 GTI, so
there you go.
Just a few
106 GTI, a bit different to a McLaren.
Different than a 650S.
Different, yeah.
Listen, I do want to go back just to the start because it was a late green flag call, rolling start, not necessarily something you guys are familiar with, and you kind of got caught off guard, I think, because Stefanko got up the inside of you and you were able to hold your line. How much did you kind of emphasize that start, and were you willing to say, okay, if I lose the position, I'm still in the top 5?
Yeah, of course, the goal was to finish top 5, but I knew if I would be first place, I could create a gap and it would make my race a lot easier. So I know Zandvoort quite well, so I knew that if I would have the outside on turn 1, he wouldn't be able to pass me. And if I stayed on the outside in turn 2, I had the inside for turn 3. So I decided to just stay there and hope we wouldn't crash. And in the end, it worked out.
Well, good trust in each other and great race. Congratulations. That's a masterclass, I have to say. You and Rudy van Buren, the two Dutchmen, the Flying Dutchmen, already into the finals, and we'll see you in 2 weeks' time.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Well, great race, I think. Lots to talk about. We're going to bring in everyone else. We've got Miguel Fishka going to join us, as well as Ed, our race director. So
another race director.
I know Mr. Headmaster is going to join us this week as well. And then, of course, Scott, who is in the comm box with you, Ben. Again, very solid race. A few talking points. I guess we can start with Williams. David Williams started out highs and lows for him. He started out by qualifying, I think it was in a 3rd position, missed the 30-second queue up for the grid. Because it's a rolling start, thankfully he doesn't have to wait for everyone to pass and be at race pace to join. He was able to join the back of the rolling start. Made up, I think, 8 spots to 12th, but overheated the tires doing it. Look, a wild race for him, but a missed opportunity.
Yeah, Miguel, I mean, how does a guy like him, with his experience, he works for the virtual sim racing school, so he's teaching sim racing. How does that happen?
I don't know, it must be very frustrating if it happened to me. I wouldn't enjoy a bit. Imagine qualifying on the top 5 and suddenly, or not logging in at the right time, and then you are on the back. So I think for him, he has to try again next week. So it's a bit unfortunate.
I will say that he did go first of the 5 Superpole drivers, so perhaps he got up and left his computer, went to the washroom or went to get a drink, and then was late coming back. But a little bit late getting there. Great battles throughout. As we'll jump into some of the replays, there was all sorts of things. The start especially was very, very, very solid, I have to say. But this is David Williams coming all the way back through. I think he gets 3 cars in the span of about 4 or 5 corners. It was extremely close. Scott, I think you actually had the chance to commentate on all of this.
A little bit, yeah. I mean, David is someone I think who's predominantly used to iRacing, of course, and going up all the way through from rFactor, but he's certainly proven himself in terms of racecraft that he can race his way through on a circuit where, compared to Silverstone, it's not as easy to pass. It's more narrow, it's more flowing, there's not more elevation changes. He certainly was able to find the passing spots, and even passing spots where probably he didn't even know you could make an overtake. So because of that, he was able to make the full use of it and push his way through. So effectively, if he can qualify for round 3 next week, he could be one to watch if he can actually get himself on time for the start this time.
Yeah, but so many different variables. These guys aren't at a racetrack. They don't have a team manager giving them the helmet at the right time. You know, he had been, as you say, he'd been in the Superpole shootout, so anything had happened, from going to get some water to fiddling around with his pedals to going and having a wee, you know, simple things. Ed, headmaster?
I spoke to David very quickly after the race, and he told me he was expecting me to tell him. I've heard you're calling me strict. Thanks very much.
It wasn't me. It was
you.
Me?
No. Anyway, look. I heard he was used to, as all the others were, that I would call them to start various things. So they would wait at the pit exit during Superpole, and then, you know, once I was ready to let them go, then I would say, okay, you can start your warm-up lap. And so at the beginning of this is something that is just purely specific to, you know, sim racing. You click race and you go on to the race session. You have 30 seconds to count down sort of the grid, and he didn't get there in time because he was waiting for me to say, you may now click race. which is sort of, you know, it's a little bit harsh.
Classic racing driver, blaming somebody else.
Exactly. Well, exactly. You had your book of excuses.
He said it was a silly mistake at the end of the day, but he's going to come back next week. He'll be there. Yeah.
Well, final week, and you're going to have guys like Benito back in there.
Trying to qualify still.
Lee Morris will be back again. I think he's been in the top 10 now twice and come very, very close. Harslav Honzik, excuse me if I mispronounced his name. He was the one that did get the cut penalties. Miguel, last week we saw it in qualifying. We thought there was maybe a chance that people had gone wide at Stowe. This week, it was curbs on the inside that they were clipping, I think going into the chicane mostly.
Yeah, well, in terms of the cutting, we'll let the game decide. It's not us take part of analyze that situation. So if you cut more than a few times, the game will put a drive-through penalty, and that's what happened to him. So always during the race you need to be careful. You might take advantage, you know, you can do it a few times, but like in a normal race, you do it once, you get a warning, twice, third time you have a drive-through.
But it was interesting to hear from the top runners that they were feeling like they were about half a second off the pace because they were scared to get cut penalties.
Well, it's all a measurement of how close to the limit you can go. Yeah. And Jeffrey, he was clearly very confident with the track limits. He probably had, I don't know, maybe a bit more laps, or he got to know how far he could go up to the edge, and he was consistently doing it. So it's all a bit how close you can get to the limit.
I think something I saw in the race was that because the track is so much thinner, people were getting a little bit more frustrated. Although, I mean, there were really not very many incidents that involved contact that I saw, but I think it did frustrate people a little bit more, and so you saw people trying to take a bit more of a bite out of the corner just to get a little bit of a better exit, some sort of advantage on the guy ahead, because it's just the way the track is, the tarmac is so thin in places that the car ahead of you just fills your landscape. So I think that's part of it.
Level of racing overall, I think, was quite clean. We've got a number of good battles. By the way, this was Bullock Bassi, who had a good start, made it up this time to 5th spot. He was ultimately qualified 7th, promoted to 6th due to Williams' issue, but held it together with pressure on him again. I think hats off to him for making it through ultimately.
Yeah, well, I mean, I see he's been talking to you on your social media.
I did challenge him to the win. He didn't quite get it, but he tried.
Well, I mean, I think the poor boy's very much looking forward to meeting you. So, I mean, hopefully he does.
He didn't listen. He didn't win. I'm a man of my word. Okay, he's got to win if he wants.
But you'll send a signed photo.
I think the day he wins, he'll dedicate that win to you personally. I think.
All right, guys, listen. For the record, that signed photo may or may not be topless, but I'll keep that a secret and a mystery for everyone except for Kim. But Scott, I mean, you saw both races firsthand. I think Silverstone, maybe the limits weren't such a factor, so they could push a little harder. But overall, I think impressive on both fronts.
Yeah, I think Zandvoort a little bit so, maybe a tiny bit more because of the fact that, because as we've said time and time again now, it is a narrower circuit. There's not that much room to kind of make a pass anywhere or go side by side in some cases, so it's not as easy. But I think in terms of the racecraft, I mean, again, there wasn't that many sort of passing. There was a couple more passing opportunities, particularly towards the end of the race, as we saw on that last lap move into Tarzan, between, I think it was Bouteloup and Burlak going up the inside. So, but I think over the whole, maybe Zandvoort gets a slight edge because there was 1 or 2 more overtakes and 1 or 2 more action going on. There was less cars going off, less cars spinning. I think we only had 1 car go off. I think it was Diogo Silva go off a couple of times. But this battle that we had going on all the way through between Burlak, Bouteloup and Morris nose to tail for 6th, 7th, 8th, that was really the battle of the race, because those 3 were the closest trio on track and just couldn't leave each other alone. They couldn't get away from each other.
Well, didn't you think that, certainly the body language of Bouteloup's car, he looked the faster of the 2 all the way through the race, but he just didn't seem to have the bravery to make the move until the very last lap.
Yeah, I was constantly looking at them. I was expecting some sort of, well, because he was for so long behind them, I was expecting some sort of a contact. But then on the end, he did a very, very clean overtake. It's just a shame he was so on the end. It was on the last lap. And maybe if he did the overtake a bit earlier on, he maybe be closer to 5th place.
Yeah, I mean, looking at them coming down to that chicane there, he looks faster over the brow of the hill, he looks later on the brakes, he's super tucked up under Burlak's rear end. But eventually just doesn't have the bravery to go down the inside. And is that just the nature, obviously, of the headmaster setting the rules, but also the circuit is so narrow?
It's so difficult to overtake here. So.
You're also, I mean, when I generally before these rounds, I do a lap as fast as I can, and you know my goal generally is to get into the top
145.
No, actually, I wasn't so good as I was at Silverstone. I was about 2 seconds off the top guys this time, but at Silverstone I'll have you know I was just over a second off, so I was quite proud of that. But no, look, I mean it's not just the width of the track or the length of the track, it's the grip of the track as well. You know, you do have the rubber that's rubbering in, but also just the general kind of sense of grip on the tarmac, and I think it felt like there was less at Zandvoort. So yeah, and there are a lot of corners where they're right on the edge of adhesion, and if you push the car just a little bit, they're right off. So I mean, that guy, it was Bouteloup, I think it was. Yeah. You know, I saw him getting very crossed up at places, and yeah, he's very quick, and he was trying to find a way past. But it was great that he wasn't turning that into contact. He was able to control when it was, when it was slightly loose. So, and actually, it just goes to show, I recognise so many of these names from big leagues, like Sim Racing Club and stuff like that. I wasn't surprised by the driving level that I saw today. I mean, it just is so high, and I expect it.
There might be something in the adhesion that you talked about. Naturally, being next to the beach, Zandvoort is actually known at times for having less adhesion than most circuits, similar to perhaps to Dubai, where it gets a lot of sand blown through and a little bit more dusty, and it doesn't quite see the same amount of rubber that perhaps Silverstone sees. But perhaps it was an issue for De Silva in specific, Scott, because he was in the top 10 and certainly lost adhesion at this point.
But he did, yeah. I watched the first spin. You see, he goes through the ski black corner up through turns 8 and 9. Just on the exit of turn 8 is where he loses it. So he comes through here, takes a little bit of curve, but it's the exit that really does it. It just puts 2 wheels onto the grass, and there it goes. Just once it's gone, you're just a passenger in that situation, even on dry grass. And then just picking his way through the gravel. And I think he spun again, and because of that, that seemed to be sort of his that was his evening over, I'm afraid. So he found a limit of adhesion, surpassed it, and went across that line, and just couldn't make it stick, and he dropped down to about 15th place.
That's why I love Zandvoort, because if you did that at Silverstone, you get away with it.
Yes.
And you just open the steering wheel, run a little bit wide, all right, you get a track limit, but you'll be back on the circuit and you'll be fine.
I think that's an issue with a lot of modern circuits, to be completely honest. I mean, I get
we could
safeties
start a whole new
precedents, but yes, we could. I like. There's a reason I like Nordschleife so much. It's very punishing. Street circuits, the same thing. Track limits, nah, forget about a sensor. You could just forget about your car. I'm a fan. That's not exactly the way, by the way, that most people would idealize going to the beach at Zandvoort in that sand. I can't imagine. It's just over the dunes.
While spinning.
Yeah, exactly.
I can't imagine they appreciate just sunbathing, or so just get a flying 650S just going through the air, maybe sort of.
That'd be one way to advertise the car. Perhaps
they
not
would,
the way
yeah.
McLaren's looking at. You can actually get into 650S. We're not done yet. We've still got one more week of rFactor 2. In fact, we head back to Silverstone's. Well, one more week of the qualifiers, though, for the open to everyone, the 20 qualification spots. I'm sure we'll get some familiar names yet again, but it's Silverstone International. Those are open right now, by the way. If you head to rFactor, you can jump on board and be a part of next week's race. The 5 from that join the 10 that we've already got, plus a few others that'll be in the qualification race. There's 5 more spots. I guess you're right. You can still, but it's very limited at that point. And then winner of that goes to race week in November. But that's not the only way, because iRacing has just opened up very recently, in fact, their qualification spots, and that all starts in September. So iRacing starts in September. You're actually in a Formula car and some incredible circuits, some of the best in the Formula One calendar. Another chance, another opportunity to become the world's fastest gamer. We join you again next week with rFactor. We continue on in our qualification process. We're right back here in Silverstone, and so too are the virtual competitors. Thanks so much for joining us. Remember to like, follow, and subscribe depending on where you're watching us. Keep locked on all the updates, including that of Twitter at TheWFGamer is the @ for them. And be sure to follow along because there's so much going on, guys. I have to say the level of racing is excellent. I'm enjoying the storyline, and I think all the way through to November it's going to be entertaining, intriguing, and exciting. We'll see you again next week.